Hi, my name's Graham. I'm 7 months and 3 weeks clean and sober. And yeah, my life is really a miracle. I was adopted at birth many years ago in a place called Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And yeah, I grew up very privileged. We had all the trappings of a pre-independence lifestyle, and I never suffered anything in terms of turmoil or trauma during my childhood. I was happy. I think my school reports always said I was a daydreamer. I always thought I was special, but it was an amazing upbringing in Zimbabwe in those days. And by the time I got through school, I actually didn't do very well academically, but by the time I'd turned 20, I'd been doing various jobs: sales, tobacco farming, owning a bar. And the culture in Zim those days was very much centered around drinking. And from the age of 17, I'd learned how to drink well. And I found myself in this vortex of sport, golf mainly, and social occasions at every weekend. So I never lacked anything. By the time I was 26, I'd found my wife to be, got married, had 2 children quite quickly. But at the age of 30, I lost my mother to cancer, and I started to really drink as much as I could to take away the pain and to take away that void and fill that void with alcohol. I was just a real mess of a man, and I decided there at the age of 30 to move to Mauritius, where I spent the next 23 years. To cut a long story short, life on a tropical island wasn't what I thought it would be, but I managed to stick it out mainly for my kids. I think I was a really great dad, and we had a great family. But always at the back of my mind was the addiction of more, more, more. I wanted more all the time. And halfway through in Mauritius, I started to go back to drugs and alcohol. And it eventually eroded my marriage. It distanced me from my children. And I finally got divorced 8 years ago. Not even understanding that I had a drinking problem or I had a drug problem, but just felt suddenly alone. And that loneliness really, really got at me. I had always had people around. I'm always very sociable, but an overwhelming sadness crept into my soul, and I found it difficult to deal with it. So the only way I knew was to carry on looking for more, to fill my ego, and to actually just run away from everything that I had to face. I ended up moving countries several times to try and run away from my problems, to Cape Town, back to Mauritius, back to Zim, and eventually I found myself in Harare during lockdown, during COVID, and that's when the real problems began to surface. I had everything on tap. I had a great job, but I was totally isolated, and it got to the point where my alcoholism became an everyday event. So running away from my problems hadn't worked. I'd lost most contact with my children. I was wearing a number of masks to suit every event that I was ever invited to, and slowly those dried up. And I found myself in the 3 weeks before I came into changes, drinking myself. I call it suicide in a sense that it was that I didn't know where to go and I didn't know what to do. And I was found on the floor of my lounge by my maid, who then phoned a friend of mine. And I was literally on death's doorstep. I was comatose, my body had shut down, and within an hour someone had come to see what the situation was, and I can't tell you what happened in those next 4 hours, but somehow angels got me into a wheelchair, onto a plane, and I had no clue where I was going. No idea what rehabilitation was, no idea what treatment was, no idea what on earth to expect, except I knew that this was a lifeline and it was going to change, it was going to keep me alive. When I got into changes, I remember it was dark. Someone had to carry me in through the doors. I couldn't walk, and someone had to fill my admission forms in, and I was in detox for 4 days. I couldn't walk, I had no movement. But when I came out of detox, I suddenly connected with this group of people who I never knew existed, and that we all shared one common problem, that we were addicts. And through those first 2 weeks, I came to understand some concepts about addiction that I never knew. My powerlessness, my unmanageability. And I can honestly tell you that with that insight into who I was, and that miracle that had got me there, I knew I had no other options but to carry on. And I was shown for the first time in those first 3 weeks in primary, love. I don't have any other word for it. There was love from the people that were sharing the same problem that I had. There was love from the clinical team. There was love from the counselors. Even though they were exposing me for all my behavior, I knew that there was love behind every one of them. But it was that connection in primary that made me feel like I'd finally found my home. It was as if I had finally found a place to be, and I could be myself. But it was a tough road, and going through those first 3 weeks, I thought I was coming to South Africa just to get better, and then go back home. But on the 3rd week, I was offered the chance to go to secondary, and I actually didn't blink. I decided that this was a year for me, that I deserved a year to find out who I was. And getting into secondary was where the real miracle happened for me. It's a place where you can sit still, and you can examine yourself, and you can sit with yourself, and you're not distracted by anything on the outside. It's safe. And I have never laughed so much in all my entire life, filled with joy inside, that I could share these. I was there for 4 months, and those 4 months changed my life, because secondary is not about your addiction per se. It's about those things that led to these behaviors, and learning to unpeel that onion every day, to learn who you are. Eventually I could stand up and look in the mirror and just be me. I really liked what I'd become in secondary. And it was a freedom I never knew existed. I knew I was a good person, but I didn't know how to be me. I was always camouflaged. I was a chameleon in a box of Smarties, as my friend used to tell me. But I realized that the love and support shown me in secondary, and it was tough, but it was free. It was freedom. I didn't even look at a calendar. I did look sometimes at exit dates, but I never had options. I lost everything when I got into that wheelchair. I lost my family. I'd lost everything I owned. I'd lost my health. But most of all, I got a life back. And when I came into halfway, it was difficult for me at first, because I didn't know how to be in the real world. And I found that step quite difficult, in fact, because it was really going back to being me in the real world, and having the chance to see what tools I'd learnt in secondary and in primary to take with me. And it's really helped me understand that I can't rush the process, that I can't reintegrate without having the support of changes around me. It's impossible. I'd gone so far that I needed to take a lot of time to come back. And I'm really grateful for this chance, because I haven't got enough time left on the planet to do this again. So I take it very, very seriously. It's life or death. It's drug addiction. It's alcohol addiction. It's not a joke. It really is life or death for me. So yeah, I'm really grateful to what changes gave me. It saved my life. Thank you.